Star Wars: The Clone Wars, not to be confused with Star Wars: Clone Wars, see, there's a "the" now, is a 2008 television series set between the two Star Wars prequel films Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith.
Well, this should be fun.
The show is considered by many fans to be the very best of prequel-era Star Wars, and though I haven't really ever seen it before, I've always heard great things, and with a new season just over the horizon, what better time to check it out? The Clone Wars was originally meant to be a successor to the 2003 Clone Wars, taking place during that show's time skip after Anakin Skywalker's promotion to Jedi Knight, but before he grew out his hair all the way for the third film. The show's art style and character designs were also somewhat based on the 2003 Clone Wars, with Genndy Tartakovsky's signature hard-edged, angular animation aesthetic translated into 3 dimensions, although Tartakovsky himself had no involvement in this newer iteration of the show. Instead, The Clone Wars was developed by Dave Filoni, who at the time had mostly worked as a storyboard artist on various cartoons, most notably having directed several episodes of Avatar: The Last Airbender. A lifelong Star Wars fan, Filoni would go on from The Clone Wars to be even more heavily involved with later Star Wars television properties such as the Clone Wars sequel, Star Wars Rebels, and most recently Star Wars' first live-action TV show, The Mandalorian. The Clone Wars was the first of many Star Wars properties to be fully animated using CGI, and for a TV budget, the animation on this show is decent enough looking, even if I still much prefer the style of the 2003 series. For what it's worth though, it looks nice, and there are things about this animation that I really enjoy. Everything is textured with this sort of paintbrush looking effect, and there's some really beautiful scenery on occasion. A lot of the backgrounds look like they are literally digital paintings. The lighting and shadows also look great. Computer animation has come a long way since 1994, and while this show was not animated by Mainframe, the studio behind many of the other CGI shows I've talked about in the past, this animation does actually remind me a lot of Beast Machines, where everything's got this sort of matte, rubbery look to it, except where Beast Machine's cast was made up entirely of robots, the majority of the characters in the Clone Wars are human, so there's this uncanny valley effect that took me a little getting used to. The character models also tend to look a little stiff, especially when it comes to facial expressions. Anything that's supposed to be fibrous or fuzzy, like fur or grass, is kind of rough, and you can tell that some of the models and environments that were only intended to be used once or twice are kind of an afterthought. You know, things like alternate costumes for the main characters, or certain props that aren't going to be relevant again after one episode. However, I will note that the animation does visibly get a lot better as the series progresses. Looking ahead to some later footage, there is a notable bump in quality over time. Being a show that contains the word war twice in its title, the story of Star Wars: The Clone Wars is mostly centered around war, and it manages to tackle this subject matter with a lot more maturity and nuance than I was expecting, often presenting scenarios where the right thing to do isn't readily apparent.
Every episode of The Clone Wars has a built-in thematic message. Stories about loyalty and honor and courage, and sacrifice, people overcoming their personal demons.
I like how the show constantly demonstrates that in a lot of ways the Galactic Republic was already pretty shitty even before being reorganized into the Empire. There's constant mention made of the fact that the Separatists are winning more and more worlds over to their cause, so separating from the Republic has got to be appealing in some way.
I'm sure the Republic Senate will approve a relief effort. The vote was postponed.
Where was the Republic when our supply ships were destroyed by pirates? Where was the Republic as my people starved?
I promise you, Cham, the Republic will not abandon Ryloth.
I've heard enough of your promises, Jedi.
There's also a 2-part episode where a couple of the Jedi are stranded on the Scottish monkey planet, and they're actually forced to confront the fact that for all their talk of being galactic peacekeepers, the Jedi are kind of a bunch of hypocrites who perpetuate war and violence.
We're fighting for freedom.
And freedom and peace require fear and death?
It's all very apropos for contemporary political analogy that kind of reminded me of Star Trek in that way. There is, however, a very good reason why it took me so long to check out this TV show. Like many others, my first exposure to the 2008 Clone Wars cartoon was through its theatrically released pilot movie, which came out a few months before the TV show. And that's kind of unfortunate in retrospect because, well, the movie is pretty bad, and it's not at all indicative of the show's overall quality. In fact, I think it's fair to say that this movie is by far the series' worst material.
We have no interest in disagreeing with you.
Interestingly, though, this film wasn't originally intended to be a film at all. It started out as several disparate episodes that were later edited together along with new material added in to help it reach feature length, and it really shows. The film's plot is that Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker, along with a new character, Anakin's apprentice, Ahsoka Tano, have to save Jabba the Hutt's never-before-mentioned son from Count Dooku, who has teamed up with Jabba's flamboyant uncle Zero the Hutt, a character whose voice kinda sounds like King Kai from Dragon Ball Z.
There is no misunderstanding.
Their evil plan is to frame the Jedi for the kidnapping and stage a coup for Zero to take over the Hutt clan and ally with the Separatists.
My nephew Jabba's son has been kidnapped by you Republic Jedi scum.
This story is every bit as awful as it sounds, but thankfully none of it is ever relevant again for the rest of the season, nor does Zero make any further appearances.
I had no choice. Dooku said he'd kill me if I didn't help him kidnap Jabba's son. You have to believe me. I love that, Hutley.
The decision to release this theatrically was made by George Lucas himself, who was reportedly very happy with the early footage he was shown and thought it would serve as good marketing material for the series proper. As I've said, it instead had the opposite effect on me. Seeing this movie back in 2008 effectively killed whatever interest I may have otherwise had in checking out the rest of the series for years. Also, due to the nature of busy television production schedules, the episodes chosen to make up this film happened to be just whichever ones were farthest along in production at the time that this decision was made, not necessarily the ones that were meant to air first. These episodes were then reworked to fit around this Jabba the Hutt kidnapping plot, which doesn't even begin in earnest until around the 30-minute mark.
Where's Stinky?
You told me to put him down.
Find him. Come out of there, you grubby little slug.
Consequently, the chronology of the Clone Wars first season ends up being a little weird, with the first episode of the season chronologically ending up as the 16th one in the completed production order. As if this wasn't confusing enough, new episodes would later be produced as part of the second and third seasons that take place during and tied directly into several episodes from season 1. I'd gotten through about half of this first season before being told by one of my cousins that the show's production order was different than the recommended watching order. Yes, that's right, this show actually has an official recommended watching order available online due to the fact that the entire first 3 seasons worth of chronology is really wonky. So for that reason, this isn't exactly a review of the Clone Wars Season 1 in the strictest sense. It's more a review of most of the first season, plus the 16th episode of Season 2, as well as the first and third episodes of Season 3, minus the final episode of Season 1, which you aren't actually supposed to watch until the middle of Season 3. Confused yet? Well, don't worry, it's not actually that important, because The Clone Wars is really more of an anthology series than anything else. The way the show is written, it's specifically designed so that you can basically jump into any episode in whatever order you happen to catch them, though you do get a little more out of it by watching everything in the correct order. Each episode begins with a little title card presented in the same style as the long time ago text from the theatrical films, and gives you a sort of thesis on that particular episode's themes. This is then followed by a quick voiceover which catches you up on any relevant information that you might need to know going into the episode, again serving a similar function to the opening crawl from each of the movies.
The Republic fleet is on the defensive and pushed to the brink as the Separatist army rages an epic battle against heavily outnumbered Republic ships. Anakin Skywalker and his Padawan Ahsoka race across the galaxy to aid Jedi Knight Aayla Secura, who is in the midst of a fight for her life.
These intros took a little getting used to, but they've really grown on me. The voice that the narrator is doing clearly evokes the feeling of old-timey war propaganda, which is appropriate given the subject matter.
All America is behind these armaments, supplying an uninterrupted flow of materials for machines of mechanized might, the armaments of war that an embattled world must have if democracy is to survive.
I love democracy.
Unlike in similar types of cartoons, you're not just stuck watching the same 10 or so cast members go through the same motions in the same locations week after week. Very few episodes feature more than 2 or 3 of the main cast in a prominent role, instead rotating them out, with shifting perspectives from each adventure to the next, as we move through various battles, espionage, or political intrigue. The show is careful not to overuse any characters or settings, and there's always some new type of situation or problem that needs to be resolved so that it avoids becoming stale. Because there's so much variety, the show is incredibly easy to watch. Even when you get the occasional episode that I didn't care much for, there's always still the next one to look forward to because each one is something new, and it doesn't get bogged down in any one thing for very long. There are a few multi-part episodes, but even most of those are kind of structured so that you don't actually need a ton of context from one to the next. For example, the big finale of Season 1 is this 3-parter where the good guys have to liberate the Twi'lek planet from Separatist control. The first episode takes place up in the planet's orbit, with Anakin and Ahsoka breaking the Separatist blockade. Then in the second episode, we're down on the planet's surface, with Obi-Wan and a detachment of clone troopers as they secure important strategic positions. And finally, the third episode follows Mace Windu seeking the help of a local Twi'lek resistance movement in order to strike back at the occupation. Many episodes like this one incorporate guest characters and even give them some solid development. These guests are usually made up of random Jedi who appeared in the background during the prequel films, but sometimes you get various clone troopers and even the occasional new character. Some episodes don't even feature any of the main cast, centering entirely around guest stars, which is really cool. It helps give a great sense of scale to the universe of the show, and this war specifically, even more so than most of the films do with their constant fixation on this one extended family.
Obviously during a war there's lots and lots of stories, very exciting action, drama, heartbreak, and comedy. And this really did broaden the canvas of what Star Wars is about.
Among the guest characters so far, I think that my favorites are the Jedi Masters Kit Fisto and Plo Koon. As for the main cast, the big featured new character is of course Anakin's new apprentice, Ahsoka Tano, but I don't really have a ton to say about her yet. I don't dislike her, but she doesn't really do much for me either so far.
Liar! Liar!
I do understand, however, that she goes on from here to become one of the most beloved fan-favorite characters in the entire franchise, so I'm gonna give her the benefit of the doubt and assume that most of her interesting character development is yet to come.
How nice of you. Tell you what, I'll give you a merciful death.
The biggest surprise out of the main cast was actually Anakin Skywalker himself, voiced here by Matt Lanter in place of Hayden Christensen, who played him in live action. Anakin is a much better character here than he was in the prequel films. He seriously feels like a completely different person.
Do not take the lives you saved lightly.
I don't. But I also can't take the lives I lost lightly.
Ordinarily, I guess I would probably grouse about how this portrayal isn't consistent with the movies, but this time I don't even care because this is just so much better.
Liar!
It feels to me like the show is consciously retconning Anakin to be a more effective protagonist.
I'm a Jedi. I know I'm better than this.
You better start proving it. Captain Rex will show you how a little respect can go a long way.
Right. He's overly critical. He never listens. He doesn't understand. It's not fair.
There's a bigger picture that you're not aware of. Listen and obey your superiors.
Of course, he's still got his flaws. He's still a hothead. He often becomes impatient or irritated, and he's got a penchant for breaking or bending the rules on occasion, but at the same time, he's also likable and charismatic, and his heart is always in the right place.
So let me get this straight, Anakin. You risked the mission, all your men, even your Padawan, to save a droid.
R2 is more than a droid. He's a friend.
I actually like Anakin for, like, the first time ever, basically. He seems like a pretty cool guy. You know, actually, if there's one thing I do really appreciate about Ahsoka in this first season, it's how she helps to inform Anakin as a character. Once we get past the whole, uh-oh, how are they gonna work together if they can't even get along thing that they're trying to do in the pilot movie, I actually rather enjoyed the dynamic that these two are given on this show. This is the first time I can recall where we ever see Anakin meaningfully interact with any other character who isn't either above him in rank or an enemy. I mean, besides, you know. We get to see him do his best to be a good teacher to Ahsoka, to set a good example for her. He sees his own faults mirrored in her, and in a way, he's got almost as much to learn as she does, which I think is kind of the point. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how this teacher-student duo progresses in the coming seasons.
So it's okay when you don't follow what the Council says.
Doing what the Jedi Council says, that's one thing. How we go about doing it, that's another. That's what I'm trying to teach you, my young Padawan.
Anakin and his new wife, Padme, are rarely seen together, which is probably a good decision because their romance and marriage is supposed to be this big forbidden secret, and they're in the middle of a war where he's a soldier and she's a politician, so it would be a little bit contrived if they were in the same place all the time. However, the couple of occasions where we do see them interact are done well enough.
Ever since I've known you, you've been playing with droids.
I used to put them together. Now, I only take them apart.
At the very least, their relationship is a lot more believable here than it was in either of the two movies.
No. No.
I also thought it was a neat little detail that Obi-Wan gives Anakin the side-eye whenever his former apprentice appears to show a bit too much concern for Padme's well-being over that of other characters.
If Padme's in there, and then we go in guns a-blazing, she may get killed.
Padme may be lost, Anakin. Don't risk the mission trying to rescue her.
Obi-Wan himself is fine. He's played here by James Arnold Taylor, taking over for Ewan McGregor, though at this point the impressions stacked upon one another are kind of getting to be a bit much. What we have here in this series is effectively James Arnold Taylor doing an impression of Ewan McGregor's impression of Alec Guinness from the original series.
I know you're here. You can't hide. I feel your frustration.
That's not really anyone's fault, though, and it's still a good performance, so no big deal. Also, like with Ahsoka, I have heard that most of Obi-Wan's best character work on this TV show is still to come, so that's something to look forward to down the line.
Help us, General Kenobi. You are our only hope.
The few clone-centric episodes we get throughout Season 1 are easily the best in the series so far. They're humanized to a far greater degree than any of the clone troopers or stormtroopers seen in the films. We get to see various angles of the clones' perspective on the war.
We should be out in the front lines, blasting droids.
Leave him alone. They kept him in his growth jar too long.
Yeah.
These guys are frequently seen without their helmets on, talking amongst one another about how they're feeling about any given situation. It's also made obvious that despite all sharing the same genetics, each of these clones is in many ways still an individual, with their own preferences for combat styles, career paths, and aesthetic differences like unique armor and hairstyles. Most of the clones tend to choose little nicknames for themselves based on some aspect of their personality or their job.
I'm Commander Cody, your new boss.
My designation is Trooper 27-5555, sir. We call him Fives. I'm Heavy. This is Echo.
Primarily motivated by a sense of loyalty to each other through a sort of brotherly camaraderie rather than any tangible devotion to the actual cause. At one point, we're even explicitly told by Yoda that the Force affects each of these clones in varying degrees and in different ways, just like it does regular people.
Clones, you may be, but the Force resides in all life forms. Very different each one of you are.
Aside from the two main clones, Cody and Rex, who report directly to Obi-Wan and Anakin respectively, there are many other random clones who we follow from episode to episode. There's this little unit of misfit clones who are the main focus of a couple of episodes as they try to prove themselves worthy of being troopers, as well as one defective clone who's been assigned as a janitor at the clone training facility who mentors this group.
We're nothing but a bad batch. Failures. Like you. Yeah, but you have a team. See, I never had that. You need them. And they need you.
There are a bunch of moments throughout the season where you get glimpses at the sort of existential melancholy that permeates the clone army due to the perceived meaninglessness of their lives.
I never believed anyone would come looking for us.
Why are you so certain?
We're just clones, sir. We're meant to be expendable.
There's even one episode about a clone who betrays the others after realizing that they're all essentially slaves who have been bred specifically for the purpose of putting down a resistance movement, and the Jedi are all complicit in that fact.
It's the Jedi who keep my brothers enslaved. We do your bidding. We serve at your whim.
That episode, by the way, is the 16th episode of Season 1, the episode that was originally meant to be the very first one chronologically before Lucas gave the go-ahead to put together that movie. So it's obvious that this theme of the clones being disenfranchised from their cause was intended to be a strong theme within the Clone Wars from the get-go. I was not expecting this sort of material from this cartoon series, and I was very pleasantly surprised. All of the clone troopers on the show are played by veteran voice actor D. Bradley Baker, who does as good a job as you could reasonably expect to make them all feel unique, often giving each of them different inflections or cadences whenever you've got more than a couple in a scene at one time, although it is often difficult telling them all apart.
We've got to follow orders, come on! I don't know. I think it went rather well. Quit joking around. Can we please stop arguing?
In contrast, I don't really like how the battle droids are portrayed. They keep making all these extremely inane comments like those you might hear from a kid. I get that it's meant to be endearing, but most of the time it lands a little bit closer to annoying.
You were right. The red one? No. The blue one? No, not that one. Yeah. That'll work. Boy, this is a lot more fun when they're not shooting back. I still can't seem to hit anything.
Like, yeah, sure, the battle droids were always kind of pathetic, but they weren't this pathetic.
Take this upstairs, and be sure not to drop it. Whoa! Whoa! Roger, 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 roger. Okay, right.
It removes what little smidgen of credibility they may have otherwise had left over from the prequel films, and no matter what, they never feel like they're any kind of threat.
There's the alarm button. Oh!
Speaking of annoying, Jar Jar Binks is in way too many episodes. He's in like 4 or 5, where the optimal number would probably be closer to about 0.
You betcha.
You can expect to have to put up with Jar Jar accidentally making discoveries or saving the day, since that's really the only way you can write the character without having him be an active detriment to everyone else who you do care about.
Whoopsie. Sorry. Jar Jar's been killed.
Even then, though, 4 or 5 episodes out of 24 plus a 90-minute movie isn't too bad in the long run.
One of my favorite episodes features Jar Jar Binks. I think he works tremendously well in the animated series.
Liar! Like the main heroes, the main bad guys on the Clone Wars are conserved as much as possible. Darth Sidious is left out almost entirely, so the top dog most of the time is Count Dooku, and even he only appears in a handful of episodes, mostly pulling strings from the shadows. So he never becomes devalued as a villain in the same way that, say, the Predacons from Beast Wars do. Although, that one episode where Count Dooku is captured by pirates and gets locked into, like, a space chain gang with Anakin and Obi-Wan comes pretty close. The most frequently occurring villain in the first season is General Grievous, and unfortunately in this second iteration of Clone Wars, we get the shitty movie version of Grievous rather than the deadly assassin Grievous from the original Clone Wars, even though this show was originally supposed to take place before Grievous was crippled by Mace Windu at the end of that series. I know the original Clonies has now been officially removed from the canon, but damn it, it hadn't been yet when this first season of the Clone Wars was made, so for now I'm counting it. Grievous is really the only villain in this first season who gets anything by way of character development. There's this one really neat episode where you get little glimpses at his previous life before he became a cyborg, and it's pretty cool. There's also this one really funny moment where he lashes out at Count Dooku.
You expect victory over Jedi, but all you give me to fight them is battle droids!
This show also brings back Asajj Ventress from the 03 series as one of its recurring villains.
Ventress. And here I thought this mission would be unpleasant.
The pleasure's all mine, my dear Obi-Wan. I've missed you.
Which, again, feels a little weird to me, considering everyone already seems to know her name and who she is, even though, chronologically, nobody from the Republic side other than Anakin Skywalker should have ever even met her, and I'm pretty sure he never stopped to ask her name before she fought him, lost, and then fell down a bottomless pit. But hey, I mean, it's not like a bottomless pit has ever managed to keep any other Star Wars character down. Overall, I found that this show has a lot more going for it than I ever could have reasonably expected after having only seen the terrible film.
reckon the plot against my nephew Jabba has succeeded.
So far, I think I still have a slight preference for the 2003 series, but the consensus among fans of this show seems to be that it's the second and third seasons where it really starts to get good, so I'm absolutely looking forward to that. Until next time, if you like this video, help me out by hitting the like button, subscribing if you're new, ringing the bell, and sharing this video with anyone else who you think might enjoy it. Leave a comment down below with any of your thoughts on the Clone Wars first season, and check out some of the other great stuff I've got up here on my channel. As always, thanks so much to all of you guys for watching, and take care.
Oh, they